Hey guys, tonight we drift into the silk-draped shadows of ancient China, where sleep wasn't always restful and sometimes wasn't even allowed. You'll walk through the torchlit corridors of jade palaces, trace the ink-stained scrolls of sleepless scholars, and breathe in the musty incense of mountain temples where monks chase dreams of detachment. You'll meet emperors who feared death so much they swallowed Mercury for breakfast. You'll step past sleeping guards snoring into lacquered helmets, and before long, you'll probably realize you wouldn't survive 1 week in the ancient Chinese court not without a nap, at least. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins in Chang'an, the heart of the Tang Dynasty. Just after dusk, you step into a city so crowded with elegance and protocol, it's a miracle anyone sleeps at all. Giant lanterns sway from bronze posts. Silk traders haggle in night markets. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows too early or maybe too late. You trudge toward the imperial palace, where golden roof tiles glint in the moonlight. Inside, the emperor tosses on a dragon-embroidered mattress stuffed with goose feathers. His sleep, like his reign, is uneasy, because in ancient China, especially in the halls of power, sleep isn't simply rest, it's vulnerability, a crack in the armor, a place where dreams might carry messages from ancestors or whisper secrets to enemies. Some emperors, like Wu Zetian, kept scribes on standby at night, ready to jot down midnight visions that might carry cosmic importance. Others, terrified of nightmares or assassination, rotated beds across rooms each night. The architecture even shifted for their sleep-layered compounds, multiple chambers and secret tunnels designed to keep the emperor resting in motion. And of course, there's always incense, lots and lots of incense, a perfumed haze of sandalwood and camphor coils endlessly in imperial bedrooms, meant to calm the qi, or at least mask the scent of overcooked turnips. Mainstream historians agree the imperial obsession with sleep, especially correct sleep, was more than a personal habit. It was political. A well-rested ruler was seen as divinely aligned, his dreams linked to the mandate of heaven. But if he overslept, or heaven forbid, slept too little, that could be interpreted as cosmic disorder. Cue a nervous shuffle of court astrologers and dream interpreters. You pause outside the quarters of an alchemist. He's kneeling beside a jade tray, mixing a concoction that gleams faintly in the dark. The ingredients: mercury sulfide, crushed pearls, a dash of cinnabar, and probably something that used to be alive. He's not trying to poison the emperor, at least, not on purpose. He's trying to help him live forever. Quirky side note: some early alchemical texts claim the ideal sleep posture for immortality is curled like a silkworm in a mulberry leaf. Try that one tonight and let me know how your back feels in the morning. Historians still argue whether these early immortality elixirs were taken seriously by everyone at court, or if they were more like high-stakes snake oil sold to desperate rulers who just didn't want to die. Either way, the effect was the same: upset stomach, insomnia, hallucinations, and a rather shiny corpse. You slip past a servant dozing upright against a doorframe. His head nods, jerks, then bobs again. Servants in the imperial court were expected to be alert at all hours, especially the ones tending to the emperor's sleep. If a jade pillow was slightly misaligned, or if a tapestry fluttered in the wrong direction during a dream, it was the servant's fault. Demotion, or worse. Speaking of pillows, let's talk about those. Hard pillows, rock hard, porcelain, stone, even bronze, because soft pillows, according to some ancient Chinese sleep manuals, invite chaotic dreams. Soft equals indulgent, hard equals virtuous. You imagine trying to nap with your head on a decorated brick and wonder how anyone managed 8 hours, or 4, or even 2, and yet, sleep was also cherished, especially when interpreted as a tool for longevity. Taoist texts recommend timed breathing, specific sleep postures, and herbal teas to enhance dream clarity and extend lifespan. One guide recommends sleeping with your head to the east for better qi alignment. Another insists on precisely 57 steps between your evening tea and your bed. Now you wander outside again. A night breeze rustles the willow trees along the palace moat. A cat slinks across the path, totally unimpressed with your historical insight. Overhead, stars scatter like a spilt jar of rice. You stop by a scholar's window. Inside, candlelight flickers. A brush scratches against paper. He's still awake working, studying, revising poems no one will ever read. It's well past midnight. But in his world, sleep is weakness. Better to cram in another hour. After all, the imperial exams are coming, and one misplaced character could cost him his future. Still, he yawns, and so do you. Let that be your cue. You drift down a narrow alley now, paved with uneven stones that whisper underfoot. Paper lanterns sway gently from carved wooden beams above, casting sleepy golden shadows across faded signs and shuttered stalls. The market has gone quiet, but one little shop still glows faintly, inside a dusty apothecary. Walls lined with tiny drawers labeled in looping calligraphy. You step in. Behind the counter, a tired herbalist squints at a mortar bowl. His sleeves are rolled back, fingertips yellowed with powdered roots. He doesn't look up, just keeps grinding. He's preparing a sleeping potion, not for himself. Of course, he rarely sleeps, but for a local noblewoman who hasn't rested in 3 nights, claiming her dreams are haunted by her dead grandmother's goose. The potion smells like licorice and damp leaves. Its main ingredient, Swanza oren sour jujube, seed still used today in Chinese medicine for calming the spirit. He adds a pinch of chrysanthemum, a trace of Rehmannia root, and just a suggestion of powdered deer antler. You raise an eyebrow, but he just shrugs. Balance, he mutters, everything is balance. Mainstream historical records mention sleep tonics like this, carefully brewed to restore harmony between yin and yang. Poor sleep, after all, was thought to be more than just a nuisance. It signaled imbalance in your vital essence. Maybe your qi was stagnant. Maybe your spleen was holding a grudge. Either way, the answer involved a tea that looked like it might still be moving. You duck back outside, and the herbalist's bell jingles behind you. Around the corner, a group of laborers huddle around a steaming pot. It's congee rice porridge, and yes, it's breakfast. But not for you, for them. It's the end of the day. These are night workers, grave sweepers, night soil collectors, street lamp lighters. The city doesn't pause when the sun goes down, it just swaps shifts. One of the workers jokes about falling asleep on the job and almost ending up in a coffin. The others laugh too hard, which tells you it probably happened. They speak of sleep like a luxury, not a given. Most of them grab a few hours here and there on bamboo mats or under carts. One man sleeps sitting up, arms crossed, because it's faster that way. If you've ever passed out on a couch in jeans, you understand. Historians still argue whether the average Tang Dynasty peasant actually slept less than modern people. Some records suggest segmented sleep was normal first sleep, then a midnight wakefulness, then second sleep. People might wake, pray, drink tea, even visit neighbors in the wee hours. Sleep wasn't always one long block. It came in waves. You pass a modest home, barely more than a thatched roof and a clay floor. Inside, a family of 5 sleeps side by side under woven blankets. A grandmother snores softly. A child mumbles nonsense in her dreams. Everyone shares one space because heating a second room would be wasteful and possibly fatal. In winter, sleeping together was warmth. In summer, it was endurance. There's an old superstition written on a scroll above the door. Never whistle after dark, or the ghost will follow you home. You stop whistling. Quirky tangent: in some regions of rural China, people used to cover mirrors at night, not because they were vain, but because they believed a wandering spirit might mistake the reflection for another world and step through. No one wants to wake up sharing a bed with a ghost who doesn't pay rent. You move on, now toward a Buddhist monastery perched on the city's edge. The path is lined with lanterns shaped like lotus flowers, glowing like tiny floating suns. A gentle gong echoes from the temple, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat slowed by years of meditation. Inside, monks shuffle softly in socks. No one speaks. The air is thick with incense and old wood. You slip into the meditation hall, where several monks sit in perfect stillness, backs straight, eyes half closed, somewhere between waking and sleep. Monastic sleep in ancient China was, to put it mildly, not designed for comfort. Wooden headrests, thin mats, early bedtimes, and even earlier wake-ups. Some monks practice what's known as sleep-sitting, literally dozing upright in lotus position. It was meant to preserve awareness even during rest, preventing the mind from slipping into chaos. One extreme school, the Chan Buddhists, believed sleep was a waste of precious time. Why sleep when you could meditate? Some texts claim advanced monks could go days without sleep, sustained by focus alone. Historians still debate whether these were metaphors or just incredibly cranky novices pretending to be enlightened. You watch as one monk leans sideways for a moment, his head dipping lower, then snaps back upright like a puppet yanked by string. Even peace has its battles. Outside the temple, the stars feel closer. You count a few, then lose track. Somewhere nearby, a dog howls. You're not sure if it's dreaming or warning of something you can't see. You pause to rest beside a stone wall. Vines curl up its sides like sleepy green snakes. It's quiet now, so quiet that you hear your own breath, slower than before. This isn't your world, not really, but something about it starts to settle into you. The rhythm of a time before electric clocks, before caffeine-fueled hustle culture, a time when sleep was sacred, fragile, and far stranger than we remember. Don't worry, we're just getting started. The path you're on shifts underfoot now, widening into a paved road made of dark, rain-slick bricks. You follow it out of the low city walls, past rows of bamboo groves that sway gently like drowsy dancers. You're heading inland, further west, toward a quiet compound nestled in the hills. No monks, no merchants here, just secrets, and maybe a few tragic ambitions. You reach the outer gate of a scholar's estate. The door creaks open on its own, welcoming or warning. You're not quite sure, and you're met with a faint metallic tang on the air. Inside stone courtyards, winding corridors, and at the center, a private laboratory. Candlelight flickers behind a thin rice paper screen. This is the home of a Chinese alchemist. He's working with intense focus, hands gloved in silk, sleeves tied back with string, vials bubble on a brazier. Some glow blue, one smokes gently. You lean closer, that smell vaguely sweet, almost cinnamony, but sharper. It's mercury sulfide, otherwise known as cinnabar, otherwise known as why this man will not be joining us for dinner next week. You watch as he crushes more cinnabar into powder, humming softly, eyes wide with certainty. He believes this will help him live forever. Yes, forever, or at least long enough to finish his many scrolls on the nature of reality and immortal consciousness. Mainstream history confirms that during the Han Dynasty and well beyond, Chinese alchemists were obsessed with immortality elixirs. Taoist scholars in particular pursued ways to refine the body, purify the soul, and live eternally ideally while avoiding wrinkles. Mercury, lead, and arsenic compounds were surprisingly popular. Ironically, these potions often killed the drinker or slowly unraveled their minds, or both. Historians still argue whether these alchemists genuinely believed their tonics worked, or whether some knew the risks but gambled anyway because nothing says scholarly risk-taking like sipping liquid death with a dash of optimism. You peer around the lab. Shelves are crowded with dragon bones, actually old animal fossils, jade amulets, dried lizards, and herbs labeled with symbols you can't read. A scroll lies unrolled on the floor, half prayer, half chemical equation. It ends with the character for light, but written upside down. You'd ask questions, but honestly, he's too far gone to answer. A servant arrives with a porcelain tray on it, a nightcap laced with tiny flecks of red powder. The alchemist downs it in one gulp, sighs contentedly, and lays down on a platform bed surrounded by charms and incense burners. He calls it his breathing chamber. You call it a slow-motion grave. Oddly enough, this wasn't some fringe practice. Even emperors got in on the Mercury craze. The first emperor of unified China, Qin Shi Huang, the one who built the terracotta army, reportedly died after ingesting mercury pills given to him by court physicians. He had ordered them to make him immortal. Technically, he got what he asked for. He's still very famous. You exit the compound with a quiet shudder. Down the hillside, you stumble upon a more humble scene, a village elder teaching a small group of children how to prepare a sleep pillow. Not just any pillow. Mind you, this one's filled with medicinal herbs, mugwort, mulberry leaves, sandalwood, and motherwort, stuffed into silk and sewn tight. These herbal sleep pillows were once common in traditional Chinese households, especially in summer when the air grew heavy and dreams turned strange. The scents calmed the mind, or, if nothing else, gave you something pleasant to focus on, while mosquitoes treated you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You try laying your head on one. It's not soft exactly, but it smells like a forest after rain, and your shoulders untense just a little. A girl next to you says her grandmother insists bad dreams come from hungry ghosts. That's why they leave food at the altar and sweep the doorways before bed. You ask what happens if you forget to sweep. She grins and says, then you're sharing your dreams. Quirky side note in some regions. Babies were once tattooed with protective charms to ward off night demons. Historians aren't sure how common this was, but a few preserved scrolls hint at infant forearms, inked with symbols meant to anchor the soul during sleep. Not a baby-proofing tip you'll see at IKEA. You walk a little farther and find yourself near a riverbank. Fireflies flicker like static over the water. A boat creaks gently in the current. You step aboard. The boatman doesn't speak. He just nods and starts rowing. You sit cross-legged on a pile of folded nets. The water laps gently. The boat glides past rice paddies and moonlit reeds, moving like a lullaby. Somewhere in the dark, a crane cries once and then goes still. The boatman offers you a tiny cup of tea. It tastes like plums and soil. He explains, in a whisper, that in his village, dreams are seen as journeys, not flights of fancy, but actual trips the spirit takes while the body rests. That's why some people sleep with their shoes facing the door, so their soul doesn't get lost on the way back. He chuckles quietly and adds, not everyone makes it back. You know, you laugh. He doesn't. You close your eyes, just for a moment, lulled by the rhythm of the oars. When you open them, you're somewhere new. You find yourself standing on cracked stone tiles, the kind that echo under your feet like soft whispers. The air is heavy, humid, tinged with the scent of wood smoke and cloves. Somewhere nearby, a gong sounds low and slow, as if even time itself is dozing off. Welcome to ancient India. You're in the heart of a bustling city, perhaps Varanasi or Ujjain. It's evening, and the street lamps are simple oil bowls glowing from stone niches. You wander into a quiet temple garden where peacocks rustle in the shadows, and an old monk sweeps fallen neem leaves into a tidy pile. He doesn't look up as you approach. He's in no rush. You're starting to get the sense that this night's journey is meant to be taken slowly. like steeping tea or growing a bonsai, or reading legal disclaimers before you download an app, which no one does, but still, the monk finally glances at you and gestures toward a bench under a Bodhi tree. You sit, he sits, he pours something into a clay cup and hands it to you warm milk spiced with cardamom and turmeric. This was, and still is, a traditional bedtime drink. Sweet, heavy, comforting. And yes, it probably works better than melatonin gummies shaped like cartoon bears. You sip, and he begins to tell you about the Vedic science of sleep nidra. In ancient Indian thought, sleep wasn't merely rest. It was one of the 4 goals of human life, nestled in with pleasure, duty, and liberation, a sacred pause, a rehearsal for the soul's eventual departure, and sometimes, if you were lucky, a hotline to divine visions. One mainstream historical fact: ancient Ayurvedic texts, like the Charaka Samhita, dating as far back as the 1st century CE, contain entire chapters on how to optimize your sleep. According to these guides, the best bedtime is around 10 p.m. You should sleep on your left side, and absolutely do not eat spicy lentils at 9:45 and then lie flat, which, if you've ever done that, you already know. You and the monk walk slowly around the garden as he explains how different personality types, doshas, influence sleep quality. Vata types tend to be restless, anxious dreamers. Kapha types sleep heavily, like stone statues. Pitta types, they're the ones waking up at 2 a.m., planning their entire lives, alphabetizing their scroll collection, and judging their own dream productivity. But even among all this wellness wisdom, there were some fringe practices that make you raise an eyebrow or two. One such curiosity: sleeping on a bed of nails. No, not a metaphor for regrettable decisions, a literal bed of sharpened spikes. Ascetic yogis believed that controlled discomfort could discipline the mind, free it from bodily distractions, and even induce lucid dreams. You lie down, embrace the pain, breathe deeply, and eventually slip into something like transcendence or unconsciousness. It's a toss-up. You spot one such nail bed in the garden's corner, under a lean-to roof of palm leaves. Beside it sits a thin man in orange robes, eyes closed, utterly serene despite the fact that he is, objectively, lying on several dozen tiny weapons. You consider asking what happens if you roll over in your sleep, but you already know the answer: you don't. Historians still argue whether these ascetic sleep practices were truly intended for nightly rest or more for meditative trance states. Some think it was a way to train the body to endure suffering. Others suspect it was a way to gain social clout, basically, ancient spiritual influencer energy. Unbothered, spiked and serene, you wander to the edge of the temple wall and look out over the rooftops. Somewhere below, the city exhales. Vendors douse their lanterns. Distant sitar notes spiral through the haze. And then you hear it, a soft, rhythmic chant coming from a nearby courtyard. You follow the sound and peer over the ledge. A family gathers before a small shrine to Vishnu, lighting incense and softly reciting Sanskrit verses meant to guide the soul through the dream world. One line translates loosely to "let my sleep be safe and my spirit steady." You repeat it in your head. It tastes like calm. As the family finishes their prayers, they unroll simple mats, no pillows, no blankets, just woven cotton on hard clay. A grandmother smears a dab of sandalwood paste on each child's forehead, one for clarity, one for peace, one to keep the monkeys out of the dreams, she adds with a wink. You lie beside them on your own mat, folding your arms behind your head, and for a moment you imagine what it's like to live like this. No blackout curtains, no buzzing chargers, no overthinking tomorrow's to-do list, just crickets, prayers, and the slow turning of the stars. You shift your head and notice a mural on the courtyard wall. It's Krishna, reclining on a giant serpent, floating on an ocean of milk. His eyes are closed. He is literally dreaming the universe into existence. You wonder if your dreams do that too. Probably not. But maybe the night deepens. The monk reappears as if summoned by your wondering. He gives you a fresh flower and says, "In this place, sleep is a door, not an escape." You nod slowly, then blink again, and now you're in the Himalayas. Yes, really. The air is much colder here, thin and clean and sharp enough to taste. You wrap a wool shawl tighter around your shoulders and crunch along a frost-stiff path toward a stone hermitage. Inside, a single candle glows behind a blue-tinged window. The door creaks open. You step inside. It smells of yak butter, parchment, and sage. A Tibetan monk greets you with a bow and points toward a meditation cushion. But this, dear sleeper, is not a meditation story. It's a sleep training session. You've stumbled into a practice called dream yoga, a Tibetan Buddhist tradition where sleep is used to practice awareness. Instead of slipping into unconsciousness, the idea is to remain lucid through every stage of sleep, including dreams, and eventually death. Casual. You sit, you breathe, you try to stay awake while falling asleep. The monk tells you dreams are illusions, but useful ones. You're not quite sure what that means, but then again, you're very tired. Maybe you'll understand it in your sleep. The Himalayan chill fades around you like a dream you forgot to write down, and you're somewhere else now. The air is drier, the stars brighter, the silence deeper. You're in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran, standing at the edge of a vast palace garden under a sky wide enough to make your bones feel small. The grass is soft underfoot, cool with dew, and smells faintly of jasmine. Moonlight catches the surface of a still pool, and tall cypress trees reach toward the stars with the kind of quiet dignity that only centuries can teach. A young scholar pads over to you in soft leather slippers. He's wrapped in layers of wool and cotton, scrolls tucked under one arm, and he grins like someone who's discovered an idea so delightful he just has to share it with a stranger. Lucky you. He tells you you've arrived during the height of the Sassanid Empire around the 5th century CE. Persian medicine and astronomy are flourishing. Philosophers write late into the night. And yes, they've already started debating the mysteries of sleep, dreams, and even insomnia. Not bad for a culture where timekeeping involves tracking shadows and star patterns carved into domes. He invites you to his study, a cozy stone chamber lit with oil lamps and warmed by a brazier of fragrant wood. The walls are lined with copies of Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, which, to drop your required historical fact, is one of the most influential medical texts in history. Compiled in the 11th century by Ibn Sina, a Persian polymath, it treated sleep not just as a passive state, but a key rhythm of health. You settle into a divan, and he reads aloud, his voice slow and deliberate. Sleep is a natural rest for the body. It is when digestion completes, and the soul travels among the stars. You glance up, there they are, twinkling just beyond the latticework window. But for all the lofty philosophy, Persians also took practical steps to sleep well. One curious tradition, placing an onion under the bed to ward off nightmares. You can't tell if it's symbolic or if nightmares were simply scared of weird smells. Either way, you're definitely picturing an ancient royal muttering, "Bring me the garlic, I had the horse dream again." Your host chuckles and pulls out a curious object, a kwakandak, a kind of sleeping cap lined with perfumed cotton. In Persian households, scent was considered essential to sleep. Lavender, rose, and sandalwood were popular choices, while anxious sleepers might dab a little vetiver oil near their pillow to calm racing thoughts. You take in the room. There are no beds in the modern sense, just floor cushions arranged near heat sources, heavy quilts, carved cedar headrests. Someone knew what they were doing. These people did not mess around when it came to bedtime. Still, you wonder what about the dreams. Your scholar friend leans in and lowers his voice. We believe that dreams came in 3 kinds: truthful, false, and confused. and it was the duty of wise men to interpret them correctly. You follow him out into the garden again, where an old woman tends a brazier of herbs. She's a dream interpreter, part priestess, part therapist, part walking dream dictionary. You watch as someone approaches her, muttering anxiously about a vision of falling into a well. She listens, throws a handful of frankincense on the coals, and nods. "This means wealth is coming," she says, like it's obvious. The man seems relieved. You, however, begin mentally reviewing every weird dream you've ever had for secret stock tips. Historians still argue whether Persian dream interpretation was rooted more in religion or early psychology. Some evidence points to ancient Zoroastrian beliefs, good dreams from divine sources, bad ones from demons. Others suggest it was more about social contexts. Dreams were shaped by what you ate, how stressed you were, and yes, possibly how many onions were under your bed. You lie down beside a small fountain. Water trickles quietly over carved stone. Insects hum a lullaby in the bushes. A cat, because there is always a cat, slips past you, tail twitching, unimpressed by your profound insights into ancient sleep hygiene. And then, a sudden gust of wind, and the stars rearrange themselves. You blink. Now you're in Baghdad, 9th century, the House of Wisdom, one of the greatest libraries and research centers the world has ever known. You're surrounded by scrolls, silk-bound books, globes, and candlelight reflecting off polished bronze instruments. A scholar in flowing robes greets you with a sleepy nod. He's working late because, of course, he is comparing Galenic theories of sleep with Aristotle's musings. He shows you a diagram, the animal spirits that move through your body, retreating to the brain during sleep. Apparently, the ancients were really into internal plumbing. He points to another text, this one Arabic, elegant and looping. It describes a belief that sleep and death are twins every night. Your soul temporarily leaves your body and wanders. If it returns, you wake. If it doesn't, well, good night forever. You pretend that doesn't make you just a little uneasy. To change the mood, he offers you a warm drink called nabi, a fermented date infusion once believed to relax the body and sweeten the dreams. You sip it cautiously. It tastes like sleep and raisins. Later, he shows you a chart of lunar phases. Some believe, he says, that sleeping during a full moon brings more vivid dreams, possibly prophetic ones. You glance out the arched window. Of course, it's full tonight. You rest your head on a stack of scrolls as he keeps reading. His voice gets softer, his words longer, stretching into murmurs. Eventually, he's just a whisper, and then his lamp gutters out. The scent of burnt oil mingles with parchment and plum smoke, and you drift. You open your eyes to the scent of sea air briny, thick and full of distant gull cries. Beneath you is a woven mat, the kind that leaves crisscrossed imprints on your cheek. Somewhere, a bronze gong echoes softly through stone corridors. You're in ancient Greece now, specifically a temple complex dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, and you've come here to sleep your way into a miracle. This is an Asclepion, essentially a sacred hospital/wellness retreat for the spiritually sleep-deprived. People travel from all across the Mediterranean for this, not herbs, not massages, not a stern physician with leeches. No, what they're seeking is incubation. That is, you curl up on a sacred bed, sleep beneath the open sky or a painted dome, and hope the god shows up in your dreams with a prescription. The attendants, called therapeutae, by the way, lead you through a pre-sleep ritual. You wash in spring water, you fast, you even make a tiny sacrifice bread, maybe some honey. You're told to keep your mind clear and your heart humble. Try not to think about that stubbed toe or your mildly infected goat bite. Then they leave you in a quiet hall. It's dark except for the flickering oil lamps and the glint of painted snakes coiled on the walls. Remember, Asclepius is often shown with a staff entwined by a serpent, a symbol of healing still used in modern medicine. You lie down, and the silence grows heavy. From across the room, someone snores like a dying warthog. You try not to giggle. Eventually, sleep comes, or something close to it. In the ancient world, dreams weren't just nighttime nonsense. They were diagnostic tools. If you dreamt of the god touching your shoulder, maybe your arm would heal. If he handed you a scroll, maybe the scroll said cut back on cheese. It's unclear how literal these dreams were supposed to be. Historians still argue whether they were guided by suggestion, coincidence, or simply wishful thinking wrapped in snake-themed decor. You wake at dawn, groggy but hopeful, and report your dream to a priest. He squints, nods sagely, and recommends a mixture of herbs and prayer. And if that fails, well, maybe come back next full moon. But sleep wasn't always so sacred. The scene changes. You're now in a cramped Athenian household, a modest clay brick structure with soot-streaked walls and a courtyard where olives are drying in the sun. Inside, the sleeping arrangements are flexible at best. The family shares mats on the floor, perhaps raised wooden beds if they're wealthy. No pillows, just rolled up cloaks. No blackout curtains, just the night. And as for insulation, let's just say you hear everything. That goat in the alley, that neighbor 2 doors down who's apparently still arguing with her husband. The ancient world didn't exactly have soundproofing or white noise machines, except maybe the rain. Still, Athenians had their own routines. You're told people generally went to bed shortly after sundown and rose with the first light. And like many pre-industrial cultures, they often split the night in two, a first sleep and a second sleep, with a quiet, dreamy interlude in between. This midnight period was considered a perfect time for thinking, praying, or quietly pacing while reflecting on the meaning of figs. A philosopher appears probably a stoic, judging by the furrowed brow and simple cloak. He tells you, quite matter-of-factly, that true wisdom is found in conquering the self, including your craving for comfort. Beds, he says, are a distraction. He prefers a straw mat and the inner peace of knowing that even a stone is soft when the mind is free. You nod, politely, while adjusting the folded linen under your head. A few streets over, you hear the strains of a drinking song. A group of young men are still awake, reclining on cushions at a symposium. Yes, those famous wine parties. And yes, they often went until sunrise. You peek in, and someone's lecturing on the nature of love between sips of diluted wine. The line between drunken philosophy and actual enlightenment feels blurry. One guest slurs something about dreams being messages from the gods. Another insists they're just the brain burping out thoughts. A third is snoring with his face in a fig bowl. That last guy probably had the best take. You wander down toward the Agora Athens bustling market and civic hub. Merchants are setting up, bakers are already baking, and a few tired souls stretch on benches like cats, recovering from too little sleep and too many ideas. In the Stoa, a covered colonnade, an old playwright is muttering to himself, writing by candlelight. He's been up all night, trying to capture that perfect line of dialogue before it flutters off like a butterfly. You sit beside him, and he tells you that the muses don't visit during daylight. Only night brings the kind of strange, sideways logic that births real inspiration. It's a romantic notion, less so when you realize he's probably running on a few hours of broken rest and a whole lot of honey cakes. Still, this idea of nighttime genius persists. Even today, some writers swear by the quiet, otherworldly clarity of 3 a.m. Maybe it's ancestral. Maybe it's just desperation. As you leave, you pass a temple of Hypnos, the literal god of sleep. He's depicted as a winged youth, gentle and calm, unlike his twin, Thanatos Death. The Greeks were careful to keep those two in separate mythological lanes. Mostly, your eyelids feel heavy. There's incense in the air, something earthy and a bit too pungent to be truly pleasant, but it helps. You find a quiet spot near a fountain, curl into your hymation, and close your eyes. And the dream, when it comes, is simple, just soft water sounds, bird song, and a sky that never quite lightens. The dream doesn't end, it simply shifts. You're still curled up beneath a swath of sky, but this time it's a cloudy, pale blue, cool and damp, with mist curling through the air like forgotten thoughts. You blink slowly and realize you're not in Greece anymore. You're in ancient China, somewhere in the Han Dynasty, perhaps, lying on a straw mat inside a scholar's modest home. The walls are lacquered wood, the floor creaks softly when you stir, and just beyond a paper screen, an elderly man is grinding something into a powder. It's mercury. Well, cinnabar to be exact, a glittering red ore that, when refined, becomes liquid mercury. He's muttering as he stirs it into wine, something about immortality and the Tao. The fumes are not reassuring. This is a Taoist alchemist, and like many before and after him, he believes that ingesting certain magical elixirs will extend life or even grant immortality. The irony, of course, is that many of these potions included mercury, arsenic, and lead, which means the longer you drink them, the shorter your life gets. A tragic punchline disguised as philosophy. Historians still argue whether the alchemists truly believed in these elixirs or whether they knew, deep down, that the power they promised was more symbolic than scientific. Maybe it was a little of both, a blend of mysticism, ambition, and a tendency to ignore inconvenient side effects, like dying horrifically. You shuffle to your feet and peek outside. The garden is quiet. Except for the gentle rustle of bamboo, there's a small pond, carved stones, and one very round cat napping in the sun like it's reached nirvana. The contrast is jarring. Inside, lethal experiments. Outside, serene beauty. But that's ancient China for you, a land where opposites coexist like poetry and firecrackers. Sleep here wasn't just a necessity, it was a discipline. Many Taoist sages believed the way you slept influenced the harmony of your qi, your life energy. Sleep facing a certain direction. Don't sleep with your feet pointing toward the door. That invites bad spirits. Don't eat too much ginger before bed. Don't ask why. Just trust the old texts. Across town, you find a more luxurious scene, a nobleman's home spacious, fragrant with incense, with silk-covered beds and attendants who warm your sleeping mat with heated stones. You step into the room and feel the floor give softly beneath your feet, lacquered wood, aged and quiet. The windows are wide open, even in winter, because airflow is everything. Stagnant air dangerous. Also, ghosts hate drafts, or maybe they love them. The texts disagree. You lie down on a silk pillow and stare up at the ornate ceiling, dragons and phoenixes twined in swirling cloud motifs. Someone brings you tea infused with lotus and ginseng. Another someone rubs a sleep balm on your temples. Ground pearl, crushed chrysanthemum, maybe a hint of cinnamon bark. Still, sleep eludes you, so you rise again and visit the imperial court. Here, beneath a vast ceiling of polished jade and gold, the emperor sits slumped on a carved throne. His face is waxy, his eyes glassy. One of the alchemists has given him a pill of immortal essence, mostly mercury. Again and now the most powerful man in the empire is being slowly undone by the thing he hoped would save him. The Han Emperor Jingdi was entombed with thousands of terracotta figurines in preparation for eternity. Qin Shi Huang, of Great Wall fame, was so obsessed with living forever that he sent expeditions in search of mythical islands and allegedly died from mercury poisoning after ingesting life-extending elixirs. A tragic cycle of chasing sleep's final cousin death with a poison disguised as a cure. You slip out of the palace and wander through the streets. Common folk are finishing their work for the day. A noodle vendor stretches dough into threads so thin they shimmer. A storyteller sits cross-legged by a lantern, spinning tales of fox spirits and moon maidens. His voice is low and rhythmic, the kind that rocks you gently toward drowsiness. You sit down beside an old woman who's already half asleep. She opens one eye and murmurs that in her village, they used to sleep in two parts. First sleep for a few hours, then a period of wakefulness filled with stargazing or quiet tea. Then a second sleep until dawn, more natural, she says, more human. She's not wrong. Modern science has backed this up. Evidence suggests our ancestors naturally slept in segments. This segmented sleep pattern wasn't unique to China. It spanned continents. But the way it was embraced here with quiet rituals, herbal infusions, and celestial metaphors feels distinctly poetic. You follow her home, where she wraps herself in layers of soft cotton, lies on a woven mat, and begins to hum. It's not a song, not exactly, more like a mantra, something ancient and repetitive, a lullaby that speaks more to your bones than your ears. You lie beside her and feel yourself being pulled under again, not the frightening kind of sleep that promises death, but the gentle, watery kind that promises forgetting. The mercury fumes, the anxious emperors, the snake oil promises they all dissolve into a deeper hush. And as your breathing slows, you remember that in some Taoist texts, sleep is referred to as the lesser death, a doorway to the inner world, and dreams, just travelers from another realm, whispering riddles we rarely understand. And even though a part of you knows that you are lying inside a scripted dream crafted for sleepy YouTube viewers, another part of you surrenders to the story, because here, in this sad, strange, sleeping China, where emperors poisoned themselves in search of peace and peasants made lullabies from moonlight, you found something oddly restful, a place where even tragedy has a gentle cadence. You're still drifting somewhere in ancient China, but the fog begins to lift. Sounds of bells, delicate and deliberate, draw you from sleep into a bustling Buddhist monastery tucked into a quiet mountain valley. Morning mist curls around the stone steps, and saffron-robed monks move silently through the courtyards like memories made solid. Here, in the waning centuries of the Tang dynasty, sleep takes on a spiritual weight. You're handed a bowl of rice porridge by a novice monk who's barely 10 years old. He bows, you bow. Everyone's very polite for people who woke up before sunrise. You eat in silence, broken only by the occasional slurp, because even the path to enlightenment apparently makes exceptions for porridge. Then, meditation. You kneel on a thin straw mat and watch your thoughts rise and fall, like the incense smoke coiling through the rafters. The head monk passes behind you, holding a long wooden staff, not threatening, but a gentle reminder, no napping during zazen. Ironically, for people who value detachment and peace, Buddhist monks didn't always get much rest. In some traditions, monks were limited to sitting or reclining for short bursts between prayers, chants, and meditation. In Japanese Zen temples centuries later, monks even practiced toru suimin, sleeping upright with their backs tied to a wall beam, lest they collapse into improper posture. Not exactly the sleep number bed, but here in Tang, China, the rules are a bit more relaxed. Still, no sprawling. You sleep in a communal room, heads east, feet tucked in. Dreams considered distractions. You're told to let them pass, like clouds in your tea. Historians still argue whether Buddhist sleep disciplines were originally meant as health practices, spiritual training, or just practical responses to communal living. One scroll claims enlightenment is more likely when you're well rested. Another insists sleep is a spiritual sedative to overcome. Pick your scroll. There's probably an argument for both. You step out into the herb garden behind the monastery. The scent of mugwort, chrysanthemum, and camphor hangs thick in the air. A monk is steeping petals in boiling water, making a mild sedative tea. Not forbidden, he explains, just supportive, like scaffolding for the soul. You sip some, it's bitter, with a hint of licorice. Your eyes feel heavy almost immediately, whether from the herbs or the simplicity of this life. You're not sure. Either way, you're ready for a nap you're not allowed to take, so you leave the monastery slipping out the back gate and down a winding path and find yourself in a common household again. This time in a bustling town near Hangzhou. The Song dynasty hums with trade, artistry, and silk. So much silk. Silk bedding, silk robes, silk eye masks embroidered with tiny cranes. Inside, a scholar's home. There's a distinct smell of ink and candle wax. You pass shelves filled with hand-copied texts on astronomy, medicine, and etiquette. One volume is propped open beside a sleep mat. It details the ideal bedtime hour, determined by the placement of the Big Dipper. You're advised not to sleep with books under your pillow, too stimulating for the soul. The woman of the house, a learned poet named Lin, gently clears her throat. She's writing an essay about sleep hygiene. Yes, even in the 11th century, people worried about winding down properly. She's particularly invested in the idea that certain foods disturb sleep: overripe persimmons, spicy eel, and heartbreak. That last one is underlined. She tells you she sometimes stays awake just to write, her thoughts more obedient in the dark. But when she finally sleeps, it's deeply, no interruptions. Her mattress is stuffed with tea leaves and millet husks, fragrant, firm, and rustly, like sleeping in a poem. You try it. It's odd at first, but surprisingly comfortable. Outside, the city doesn't quite sleep. Markets hum well past moonrise. Lanterns flicker like blinking stars, guiding late-night readers and wine sippers home. A traveling doctor in a felt hat offers tinctures for insomnia, decoctions of poppy, wild jujube seeds, and something he calls night frog water, which you very politely decline. Still, sleep is never far here. You find it in the rhythm of footsteps on stone alleys, in the lazy flutter of paper fans, in the way the tea cools by your bed as you drift off again. But not for long, because now the story carries you forward, across time and space, to a more foreboding chamber, a tomb. Actually, you're deep underground in a damp imperial crypt, the scent of mold and regret heavy in the air. The sarcophagus lid is carved with sleeping figures, their faces serene and utterly deceived. It belonged to yet another emperor who believed Mercury might grant him eternal dreams. The irony, once again, is sharp enough to cut silk. Mercury was sometimes included in burial practices as well, thought to preserve the body or purify the tomb. Instead, it hastened decay and poisoned the people preparing the site. Yet the practice lingered, passed from dynasty to dynasty like a bad bedtime story. You touch the cold stone and imagine centuries of sleep interrupted by foolish ambition. Then, gently, mercifully, the crypt begins to dissolve. The darkness lifts. You're back above ground, in a courtyard where an elderly woman tends to a sick child with a poultice of boiled date pits and warm millet water. She hums while she works, a tune passed down from her grandmother's grandmother. When the child quiets, she beckons you over and whispers that sleep is most sacred when it's humble. A shared mat, a lullaby older than memory, no Mercury required. She hands you a bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth and tells you to sleep facing the wall tonight. That's how the soul remembers where to return. And as you lie back once more beneath a ceiling painted with stars, you wonder how many others, over how many centuries, have sought the same thing. Not immortality, just rest, just a little peace between dusk and dawn. By now, the quiet thrum of the past is practically a lullaby. But don't nod off yet. We're leaving China behind, sailing westward into the Mediterranean night, where oil lamps flicker in the windows of Roman villas, and even emperors snore. Well, allegedly. You arrive in Rome at that perfect moment when the city exhales, the bathhouses have emptied, and the wine merchants are closing up shop. A purple haze of twilight settles over the forum, and somewhere in the distance, a dog refuses to stop barking. Some things, apparently, never change. Tonight, you're a guest in a modest domus belonging to a retired centurion named Gaius. He's missing a few teeth, insists on feeding you olives, and proudly shows off his bedroom, which is really just a tiny alcove off the atrium, with a rope-strung cot and a carved wooden idol of Somnus, the Roman god of sleep. You ask about the cot. He shrugs, says sleep is easier after years on campaign. You get used to bugs, noise, and being occasionally rained on. He mutters, the cot luxury. It's true that for much of Roman society, sleep arrangements were humble. Most citizens didn't have separate bedrooms, just curtained nooks or pallets rolled up during the day. Only the elite enjoyed cubicula, those small, often windowless rooms reserved for sleeping or, well, less sleep-related activities. But even Gaius, old soldier that he is, follows a nightly ritual, a brief prayer to Somnus, a sip of watered wine, and a few pages from a scroll about agricultural taxes. Nothing like Roman bureaucracy to put you right to sleep. Then, the dreams. Roman culture treated dreams with a kind of wide-eyed anxiety. They believed them to be messages divine, prophetic, sometimes unsettling. Entire books were written to interpret dream symbols. A snake in your dream might be a warning, or lunch, depending on context. Historians still argue whether dreams were truly central to Roman spiritual life, or if that interpretation is shaped by the surviving writings of a literate elite obsessed with omens. Either way, enough dream manuals survive to fill a library and probably fuel a few nightmares. You find one under Gaius's cot. The title translates loosely to On the Correct Dreams of Senators and Other Important Men, humble. As night deepens, you slip out into the city again. Rome never truly sleeps, at least not entirely. The wealthy feast late into the night. Servants scrub floors by lamplight. Watchmen patrol the streets, banging their staves and muttering warnings about pickpockets, fires, or public urination, sometimes all three. And in the more shadowy corners of the city, you stumble upon a curious figure, a woman wrapped in a dark stola, muttering over a bowl of herbs. She's one of Rome's many unofficial healers. Part witch, part pharmacist, she tells you of a sleep draft made from lettuce sap, vinegar, and poppy resin. Works wonders, she claims. Unless you take too much then, well, it's eternal sleep. You politely decline her sample. Roman physicians, for all their knowledge, had a slightly unhinged relationship with sleep. Galen, the famous doctor whose theories would influence medicine for over a millennium, believed that sleep was caused by the retreat of the body's natural heat inward, leaving the limbs pleasantly cool. This theory led to treatments like warm foot baths and cooling compresses on the forehead, which, to be fair, still sound kinda nice. But the Romans also believed that insomnia might come from an imbalance in bile, or from excessive thinking, or from sleeping with one's head facing south. That last one, you're told, invites nightmares or worse. Tax audits. Can't be too careful. You duck into a taberna where a few laborers are playing dice by candlelight. They laugh loudly, slap the table, and complain about their wives snoring louder than chariot wheels. One man insists his neighbor dreams so vividly, he wakes up exhausted. You realize that across time, across language, some things remain universal. Later, as the candles burn low, you're offered a place to rest in the storeroom. It smells of wine, cheese, and faint mildew. Your makeshift pillow is a folded toga, and just as you start to settle into sleep, someone snores 3 feet away with the confidence of a lion. You flee, only to find yourself suddenly standing in the villa of an upper-class Roman woman named Livia, who is mid-lecture on the virtues of sleeping upright to prevent facial sagging. She rests reclined on a low couch, head supported by a pillow stuffed with goose feathers and herbal sachets. Her maid fans her with peacock feathers as Livia explains how dreams must be written down at dawn before they vanish like morning dew. She once dreamed of a flying pig and won a legal dispute the next day. Coincidence? She thinks not. There's a faint scent of lavender in the room, mixed with myrrh and the burning oil of a lamp. Livia's eyelids flutter, the fan slows, the candle guttering in the corner casts long shadows. You tuck yourself into a corner, just out of sight. The stone floor is hard but cool. The air hums with silence. And, in that moment between the thump of a distant footstep and the creak of the ceiling beam, you realize the Romans, for all their columns and aqueducts, were just like you, tired, dream-filled, occasionally grumpy, often restless, and always searching for the perfect way to fall asleep. You blink, and Rome fades like a dream mid-sentence. The marble columns dissolve into mist, and now you're ankle-deep in straw, surrounded by the scent of peat smoke, sheep wool, and something faintly fermented. Welcome to medieval Ireland. The night air is damp, and the thatched roof above your head leaks ever so slightly. You're inside a cruck-frame cottage where everything creaks, the walls, the beds, even the cat. The fire is barely smoldering, its smoke curling up through a hole in the roof. A woman in a linen shift is muttering prayers in Old Irish while tucking in two sleepy children. They curl together like kittens under a rough woolen blanket, the air crisp enough to see their breath. Sleep here is communal and pragmatic. The bed is little more than a raised wooden platform stuffed with heather, bracken, and the occasional accidental beetle. You're welcome to share, but they warn you not to roll too far left. There's a soft spot in the floor where the goat sometimes peeks through. People in early medieval Europe, especially in colder rural regions, didn't waste time on sleep elegance. The aim was warmth and rest, not aesthetics. The notion of sleeping alone was rare and reserved for the particularly pious or the painfully rich. Yet here's the twist. Medieval folks didn't sleep the way you do. Not quite. You learn that they followed a segmented sleep cycle. First sleep began shortly after dusk and lasted until midnight or so. Then came a wakeful period, an hour or two of quiet activities. Prayer, mending clothes, maybe a snack if something edible was still hanging around. Then came second sleep, stretching into the pre-dawn hours. Historians still argue whether this biphasic sleep was the norm across medieval Europe, or if it varied wildly by latitude, season, and class. But the records from monastic writings to peasant letters suggest it was common enough to count as normal. Imagine waking at midnight, sipping a mug of warm ale, and having a brief philosophical chat with your neighbor before crawling back into the bracken. The woman of the house nods sagely. Second sleep's the sweeter one, she says. No dreams, just dark. You believe her. Outdoors, you see the stars through a rare break in the cloud cover. A cluster of men in wool cloaks are gathered near the edge of the woods, murmuring about omens and night spirits. Sleep, here, is not entirely safe, not entirely separate from the other world. There's a strong belief that the threshold between waking and dreaming is where fairies as Shihel might slip in. Best to cover your face while you sleep, or leave out a bowl of cream to appease them. The paranoia feels oddly cozy. You're handed a dried bunch of mugwort wrapped in flax string to keep the dreams clean. They say, when you ask about insomnia, an old man suggests chewing a clove of garlic, reciting the Lord's Prayer backward, then rolling counterclockwise 3 times before bed. You file that away under last resorts. Later, inside a small monastery tucked into the hills, a monk scribbles recipes for sleep tonics into a vellum manuscript by lamplight. His pen scratches like a whisper, crushed chamomile, goat's milk, and the bark of the willow tree. He murmurs, boil thrice, drink before vespers. He doesn't look up when he tells you sleep is a rehearsal for death. You don't ask for clarification. In the scriptorium, the walls are lined with saints' lives, biblical epics, and bestiaries, one of which includes a very sleepy-looking manticore. The monks sleep in narrow cells, heads on wooden pillows, feet turned toward the chapel. Any dream they recall must be recorded before breakfast. The abbot believes dreams can offer divine instruction or subtle rebuke. You overhear one monk confess that he dreamt of cheese and hasn't been able to look at goats the same way since. You step outside. There's a low wind carrying the scent of bog water and distant turf fires. A man in a fur-lined cloak passes you, carrying a leather bag filled with herbs. He's a traveling leech, a kind of medieval medical practitioner. He offers you something for restlessness, a tonic made from crushed opium poppies and sheep's bile. You're fairly sure that would knock out a bear. Instead, you accept a small linen sachet of lavender, mint, and dried moss. He winks and tells you to place it under your tongue, not to swallow, just to whisper it into your dreams, whatever that means. You continue your stroll through hedgerows and past crumbling stone walls until you reach a small village nestled along a river. The blacksmith's cottage is still lit. You peek in and see him asleep in his chair, soot on his face, his feet bare and propped on a stool. A child is curled up in the coal bin, sleeping like it's a feather bed. No alarms, no schedules. Sleep comes when it can. And then there's the nobleman's manor, a world apart. There, in the solar, the lady of the house reclines in an ornate bed draped with velvet. Her maid rubs her feet with warm rose oil, while another fluffs a goose feather pillow shaped like a crescent moon. She sips a mixture of warm wine and honey, infused with something called sleeping nettle. You suspect it's more about luxury than function. You're allowed to watch briefly. The mattress is stuffed with down, but so lumpy it resembles a loaf of unsliced bread. She complains that her dreams lately have been too political. You're not entirely sure what that means, but the butler nods solemnly. Back outside, the night deepens, the stars dim behind a rolling mist. And, once again, you're reminded how sleep has always mirrored its time scarce for some, ritualized for others, and deeply colored by what people fear and hope for in the dark. You stir just slightly as the Irish fog lifts, and now the horizon sharpens into sand-colored spires and rust-red rooftops. You're standing in the heart of Baghdad, specifically, the House of Wisdom in the early 9th century. It's the golden age of Islamic science, and the scent of ink and cardamom hangs thick in the air. Piles of parchment tower like sleepy mountains, and you nearly trip over a turtle lazily munching on a scroll's edge. You decide to pretend you didn't see that. The scholars here are obsessed with two things: understanding the universe and staying awake long enough to do it. Which brings us to a particularly ambitious, if unhinged, group of alchemists. You duck beneath an archway into a laboratory that looks more like a wizard's pantry. Bottles of mercury glint in candlelight. There's a low, simmering sound, something bubbling in a cauldron that smells suspiciously like roasted radish. And there, stooped over a marble slab, is an alchemist who insists that, with the right elixir, humans can conquer sleep altogether. His latest recipe, a mixture of cinnabar, that's mercury sulfide, gold flakes, and the essence of saffron soaked in camel's milk. You're politely offered a taste, but decline, citing your very sensitive 21st century stomach. The alchemist nods, disappointed but understanding. Immortality. He murmurs, waits for no coward. He then promptly sneezes into the beaker and ruins the batch. Historians still argue whether these alchemists truly believed they could defeat death, or if it was metaphorical, a spiritual rebirth through endless study. Either way, they definitely gave their kidneys a workout. The odd thing is that mercury-based immortality tonics weren't exclusive to Baghdad. You're reminded of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, who also drank mercury to prolong his life. Spoiler, it didn't work. You'd think word would have gotten around, but apparently, a little shared delusion goes a long way across centuries. Back at the House of Wisdom, sleep is a luxury no one really champions. Scholars often sleep in bursts, short naps taken between copying Greek treatises, translating Indian astronomical charts, and debating whether dreams are divine whispers or brain farts. One man claims he solved a mathematical paradox in his sleep, only to forget it entirely by breakfast. The angels giveth and taketh away. He sighs. Still, sleep is respected even if not always obeyed. Physicians like Rhazes and Avicenna compose early medical texts outlining sleep's role in health. They categorize dreams, examined insomnia, and even devised sleep hygiene tips. One suggestion, warm baths, followed by gentle poetry. Another, avoid noisy goats near bedtime. Solid advice, honestly. You wander through a bustling bazaar just before dusk. Merchants are closing shop, the calls to prayer rising in melodic waves. A woman in a blue silk scarf sells dream talismans, bits of copper etched with lunar symbols, meant to be tied around the wrist at night. For clear visions, she promises, you buy two, just in case the mercury vapors in the lab did something permanent. Further down an alley, a Sufi mystic invites you into a low-ceilinged tea house where the rugs are as soft as sleep itself. He speaks of sleep as a veil between this world and the next one we lift lightly each night. He tells you some Sufis intentionally disrupt their sleep, waking at precise hours to recite divine names, aligning their rhythms with the cosmos. His voice has the tone of someone who hasn't had a full 8 hours in a decade, but he seems oddly radiant. You sip tea and listen. Elsewhere in the city, nobles recline in tiled courtyards filled with jasmine, where the air is cooled by qanats, ingenious underground canals channeling breezes over clay pots of water. Here, sleep is lush and sensual. Velvet cushions, fans made of peacock feathers, bowls of figs by the bed. A singer hums lullabies passed down from pre-Islamic nomads, songs meant to lull both camel and caravan guard to sleep. One particularly drowsy palace servant tells you about a prince who tried to eliminate his dreams using constant flute music and a rotating ceiling fan powered by small goats. It didn't work, but the goats were adorable. The call to prayer returns this one, the softer, sleepier one, just before dawn. The Alchemist, now several shades paler and likely mildly poisoned, writes one final note before drifting off mid-sentence. His quill leaves a wobbly trail like a snoring signature. The house of wisdom dims, its torches burning low, its books now pillows for the overly ambitious. You slip away before the morning noise sets in. The city exhales, stretching into the pink of daybreak. In Baghdad, dreams and death share a hallway, and sleep, elusive and sacred, hovers just out of reach, like an alchemical promise scribbled into the margin of a forgotten scroll. Now your sandals tap across sun-baked stone as the spires of Baghdad dissolve, and the sky becomes an unbroken canvas of cinnamon and cobalt. You're walking through an ancient desert kingdom, but this time you're in Ethiopia, somewhere near the Aksumite Empire at its golden height, centuries before Europeans would bumble in asking for directions. And here, nestled between rugged hills and starlit plateaus, sleep takes on a different texture, thin as goat wool, heavy as incense. You find yourself in a monastery carved straight into the rock, high above the dusty plains. The monks here barely speak, not because they're particularly shy, but because they're practicing something called anchoritic silence, a vow of stillness so complete that even their dreams are quiet. Their rooms are no larger than closets. Their beds, if you can call a carved stone ledge and a folded sack of straw a bed, then yes, you ease into one of the niches, careful not to bump your head on the soot-blackened ceiling. There are no pillows, but there is a thin, leather-bound book of psalms and a beeswax candle, still flickering from a vigil that started 3 days ago. The monk beside you hasn't blinked since sunrise. He's either incredibly disciplined or very asleep with his eyes open. Honestly, either works. In the Aksumite court down below, sleep has a much softer touch. Royal beds are raised platforms draped in layers of dyed linen, guarded not only by soldiers but by trained parrots that scream if someone so much as opens a door. You lie back on one such bed, testing the softness. It's surprisingly comfy, though the parrot is giving you judgmental side-eye. A noblewoman nearby applies frankincense oil to her forehead and murmurs a prayer to Yared, the legendary saint and musical genius whose lullabies, they say, could put even the fiercest lion to sleep. Whether that's metaphor or reality is unclear, and historians still argue whether Yared even intended his sacred compositions for sleep, or if people just got very relaxed during church. Out in the fields, Ethiopian farmers treat dreams like weather omens. A bad dream, rain's coming. A good dream, your goats will finally stop escaping their pen. And then there are the black sleepers, those said to dream only in darkness, and always about rivers. One elderly woman tells you, over a bowl of spicy lentils, that her grandmother once dreamed of a silver fish that taught her the names of all her ancestors. No one questions the dream. They just add another spoonful of berbere and nod solemnly. You wander next into a market filled with spices so strong your eyes water. A stall sells sleep, smoke bundles of dried herbs said to summon calming dreams. Another sells sleep masks stitched from bark cloth and decorated with simple eyes, painted wide open to trick the spirits into thinking you're always awake. You buy one, mostly because it's hilarious. Later, as dust thickens like syrup, you arrive at a healer's hut where sleep is treated more like a disease. Too much of it, the old man warns, and your soul grows lazy. Too little, and your ancestors get offended. He prescribes a sleep tonic of fermented honey, crushed blue petals, and a dash of goat bile. You sip it politely and pretend not to gag. He chuckles, pats your head, and says, "You'll dream of giraffes tonight." You do, in fact, dream of giraffes later. Coincidence, maybe, but the giraffes look smug. Meanwhile, over in the port cities influenced by Red Sea trade, Arabian sleep customs mingle with local beliefs. Merchants stretch hammocks between palm trees, wrapped in silk that smells of cloves and myrrh. Stories drift across the docks about sailors who dreamed their shipwrecks before they ever left port and wisely stayed behind to nap instead. Smart sailors, even the Christian traditions of Aksum interweave with older, dream-based beliefs. You sit in on a midnight vigil that bleeds gently into slumber, the chanting so rhythmic it feels like being cradled by sound. Candles flicker against frescoes of saints and lions, and a young acolyte tells you that sleep is just God's way of reminding people to shut up and listen for a while. You nod, already half asleep on your wooden bench. One last tale before dawn, a wandering musician known only as the Sand Sleeper, who claimed he could fall asleep on any terrain, sand, stone, thorn bush without waking sore. Some said he was a sorcerer, others said he just had excellent posture. Either way, he was beloved for his nighttime performances, which often ended with the entire audience softly snoring before the third verse. Modern ASMR could never. A rooster crows somewhere far below. The hills take on a golden hue, and the fog in the valleys rises like steam. The monk beside you finally blinks twice, slowly, and lights another candle. His eyes close, maybe for a moment, maybe for another vigil. You tiptoe out of the monastery and glance back once. Here in Aksum, sleep is stitched into ritual, carved into stone, perfumed with spice, and guarded by parrots with attitude. It is sacred, stoic, and at times surprisingly relatable. Your feet crunch over dry brush as you step out of ancient Ethiopia and find yourself in the wide, high plains of the Andes. The air is thin here, so thin your ears pop and the stars look close enough to pluck from the sky like berries. Welcome to the Inca Empire, where sleep is yet another thing the empire plans, optimizes, and records meticulously in bundles of knotted cords called quipu. You arrive at an Incan tombo, a roadside rest house used by messengers, officials, and dignitaries. You're lucky tonight the mattress is a generous heap of dried grass, and someone left behind a woolen cloak smelling faintly of eucalyptus. You wrap it tight and let the fire's embers warm your toes. From the next room comes the gentle wheeze of a llama, who is apparently also spending the night. The Incas believed sleep was an act watched over by Apus mountain spirits with names and personalities and, apparently, very specific opinions about bedtime. Before you rest, the host places a carved stone on the windowsill, angled toward the nearest peak. For protection, she whispers. Also, it keeps out bad dreams and nosebleeds. Always helpful. Inca elite, particularly the royal family, had sleep routines that were part spiritual ceremony, part luxury retreat. Imagine gold-threaded linens, music played on reed flutes, and attendants whispering prayers for divine dreams. You try to imagine a bedtime story told by someone holding a golden fan. It's weirdly effective. Sleep among the common folk was different, though not exactly worse. Farmers built sleeping platforms from woven reeds, often raised above the floor to avoid dampness and unwanted guests like snakes. One of your fellow sleepers casually mentions that she once woke up to find a snake under her blanket and just went back to sleep. You're horrified. She's unimpressed. It was winter. She shrugs. He was warm. Across the empire, sleep is interlaced with agriculture, astronomy, and seasonal rituals. At the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, priests are said to dream communally during Inti Raymi, hoping for divine instructions buried in visions. Historians still argue whether these rituals were literal dream sessions or highly ritualized napping disguised as prophecy. Either way, someone had a good snooze on sacred time. You tag along with a young astronomer who sleeps during the day and works at night, charting the positions of stars using nothing but sticks and string. He explains that sleep is divided into phases: one for rest, one for messages, and one where you just kind of float between dimensions. You nod along, not entirely sure if he's joking. The mountain villages have their own customs. One mother tucks in her children by wrapping them like burritos in soft llama wool, placing a smooth river stone beside each child so their dreams don't drift too far. She explains. It's somehow adorable and existentially eerie at once. Then there are the Chasqui's fleet-footed runners, trained from childhood to sprint from one city to another, delivering messages across impossible distances. They were known to nap standing up, leaning against a stick balanced under their arms. You try it, you fail. It's harder than it looks. There's also a darker note in this lullaby. In times of famine or conquest, sleep became a form of escape. Some would drink a chicha brew laced with herbs designed to lull the body into a temporary death sleep, something between meditation and coma. There's a legend of a village that survived an attack simply by pretending to be dead for 3 days. The invaders left. The villagers woke up, and yes, that herb is absolutely not legal now. In one of the highland temples, you find a wall of faces masks representing ancestors, all with closed eyes. The priest explains that the dead don't dream, they remember. That's why sleep is the closest the living get to visiting the spirit world. You sit with that idea for a while. You also sit with a very soft alpaca, which makes the thinking part easier. The Inca calendar itself is dreamlike cycles of sun and moon woven into agriculture and sleep. You're shown how certain days are considered better for rest, marked with ceremonial blue ink. One man, a retired farmer, tells you he sleeps extra during the new moon because it keeps the maize sweet. That might be science, or superstition, or both. Historians are still untangling that knot. Before you leave, an elderly woman gifts you a pouch of dream seeds, tiny black pods said to help anchor the soul during sleep. You thank her, though you're a little afraid they might sprout dreams of giant talking guinea pigs. Spoiler, they do. On your last night, you camp beneath a sheer rock face carved into terraces. Llamas bleat somewhere below. A flute plays a melody so soft you almost think it's the wind. Wrapped in a multicolored blanket, head resting on a rolled-up poncho, you realize something here. In the roof of the world, sleep is not just survival, it's ceremony. A rope bridge between the body and the spirit, the mountain and the stars, the dream and the dirt, and just before you drift off, you think you hear the mountain whisper your name. Now you blink, and the altitude gives way to ocean breeze, salt on your lips, gulls wheeling above, and the heavy scent of tar and old rope. You've landed in an 18th century British port, just in time for the golden age of sail. Unfortunately, also the golden age of not sleeping very well. You're led aboard a tall ship, the kind with rigging like spider webs and sails that snap like thunder when the wind picks up. Below deck, sleep is a contest between rats, snores, and the occasional cannonball rolling loose. You duck under low beams and arrive at your bunk, or more accurately, a hammock strung in a corner, gently swinging like a cradle. You lie down, only to realize that a sailor above you has already vomited onto the deck. Twice, he smiles apologetically. Better than land, though, he says, like that clears everything up. Sailors were expected to sleep in short bursts, 4 hours on, 4 off, around the clock, known as the watch system. It was designed to keep the ship staffed 24/7, but absolutely wrecked any notion of a circadian rhythm. Your dreams are in Morse code at this point. Some captains pushed their crews even harder, and sailors would sleep upright against barrels, still gripping ropes in case they were called mid-dream to trim a topsail or swab something sticky. The naval diet didn't help much either. We're talking salt beef, hardtack, and possibly the worst wine ever fermented. One sailor swore the ship's biscuits once had so many maggots, he just ate around them, extra protein. He winked, and then promptly fell asleep with crumbs in his beard. You now understand why scurvy dreams were described as vivid. Hallucinating oranges isn't as fun as it sounds. Officers had it a little better. Tiny cabins with real beds, if you were lucky, and perhaps a window no larger than your palm. A young midshipman invites you to lie in his bunk, which is roughly the size of a coffin, only slightly less cozy. It's like being born backwards. He jokes, rocked by the sea instead of the womb. He doesn't laugh. You pretend to. In port cities, sleep was another beast entirely. Sailors spilled into taverns and brothels, sometimes collapsing where they drank, curled up under tables or sprawled on the docks. In one inn, you find 4 men crammed into a single bed, and not one of them seems to mind. They're out cold, snoring like an unholy choir. The innkeeper tells you proudly, they dream loud, means they're happy. In tropical ports, malaria and dengue stalked every bunk. Mosquito nets were rare, and sailors would sometimes coat themselves in tar or lard to keep the bugs at bay. The result smelly, slippery men sliding out of hammocks mid-sleep. One such man swears he woke up floating in a barrel of pickled onions and considered staying there. It was peaceful, he sighs, and yet, despite everything, sailors clung to sleep like a precious coin. One ship's log even records a mutiny not over wages, but over shortened sleeping hours. A tired man, one seaman scribbled in a letter home, dreams not of treasure, but of a pillow. Historians still argue whether certain navies allowed sacred hours brief, protected slots where the crew could not be disturbed short of an iceberg or mutiny. Some claim these were imaginary. Others insist they were observed like holy rites. Either way, you spot a sailor curled under the stairs with a do not disturb sign made from a spoon and a sock. Sacred enough, even pirates, surprisingly, had sleep rules. On Blackbeard's ship, hammocks were assigned based on rank and snoring volume. Legend says the quartermaster once ordered a man to sleep on deck because he sounded like a drowning walrus, cursing in Latin. It's unclear whether this is true, but someone on your ship definitely matches the description. And then there's the sea itself, a lullaby and a menace. On calm nights, you sway in perfect rhythm, lulled by the creak of wood and the hush of waves. But storms, they turn sleep into survival. You cling to the hammock like it owes you money, praying the next lightning strike doesn't hit the mast above your head. One old hand whispers, if the sea wants you, she'll call in your dreams first, which is exactly the kind of thing that ensures you won't sleep at all. Eventually, you disembark at a sleepy village near Lisbon. A retired sailor invites you into his cottage, where he's strung a hammock between two olive trees. He says he's never slept in a real bed since leaving the Navy. Beds don't breathe like hammocks do, he says, and gently rocks himself into slumber before you can reply. You lie beside him, your hammock creaking softly in the dusk breeze. Stars blink awake, an owl flaps overhead, uninterested in your nautical trauma. That night, your dreams smell of rope and salt. A cannon fires somewhere in the distance, but it's just thunder, or memory, or maybe the sea, calling again, as it always does. You wake with sun dappling your face, the hammock still swaying, but the sea's lullaby is gone. You sit up and find yourself in a vast stone courtyard, open to the sky, where incense curls through the air and monks drift by like soft moving shadows. Welcome to an ancient Buddhist monastery in Tang Dynasty, China, where the art of sleep has taken on an almost sacred form. Here, sleep isn't just recovery, it's a spiritual act. Monks believe that dreams can offer insight, even warnings, and so they treat bedtime like preparation for a mini enlightenment. You're handed a thin cotton robe and led to a simple room with a straw mat, a wooden pillow, and a lattice window that lets moonlight filter in like silver threads. It's a bit like camping. If your tent were built by a minimalist philosopher, sleep, the monk tells you, must be approached with intention. You don't collapse into it, you walk toward it, calmly, like visiting an old friend. There's a short ritual before bed, brushing teeth with salt paste, washing your feet with cool water, then sitting quietly in zazen until the first yawn arrives. He gestures for you to try. You sit, you breathe. You try not to think about the guy from the pirate ship who snored in Latin. By the time you lie down, it's as if your body has already shut down most of its functions. The silence is complete, except for the rustle of wind through bamboo. It feels holy, and honestly, a little boring in the best possible way. Not all sleep in ancient China, however, was so serene. Outside the temple walls, alchemists were trying to outwit death itself. That's right, you've arrived at the Mercury segment of the evening. You find yourself in the private chambers of an imperial alchemist, carefully crushing cinnabar into a powder with a pestle made of jade. Mercury gleams on the table like liquid silver, beautiful and deeply, deeply toxic. The emperor has asked for an elixir that grants eternal life. The alchemist offers you a taste. You decline, politely. He takes a sip, and moments later complains of a burning spleen. Many believe that Mercury, especially when combined with gold, held immortal properties. The logic, if gold never tarnishes and Mercury moves with eerie vitality, perhaps together they could unlock immortality. What they unlocked instead were centuries of insomnia, tremors, madness, and death. But hey, at least they were persistent. One Tang emperor reportedly drank so much mercury he began glowing slightly in the dark. Whether that's poetic license or early radiation poisoning, historians still argue his court described his final days as very alert, which in hindsight may have been a euphemism, for he did not sleep for 4 days straight and yelled at several ghosts. Among commoners, sleep was more practical. Families often shared Kong beds, large heated platforms made from clay and brick, connected to the cooking stove. Imagine a bed that doubles as a radiator and you're close. Everyone slept together, grandparents, parents, kids, the occasional guest. You roll onto your side and accidentally elbow a sleeping uncle. No one minds. Privacy was a Western invention anyway. In bustling cities like Chang'an, sleep was seasonal. People rose before dawn in summer and lingered in bed till late morning in winter. Night markets bustled till midnight, with the clack of mahjong tiles and the sizzle of dumplings keeping light sleepers wide-eyed. You try to drift off, but someone just yelled triple win. In the alley outside, you give up and go join them. And then there's the strange case of dream incubation. Some Taoist mystics believed that dreams could be shaped in advance with the right herbs, chants, and sleeping posture. You lie down under a tree that supposedly encourages visionary dreams. The monk gives you a smoldering stick of something that smells like burnt oranges and dragon fruit. You dream of flying over plum blossoms and having tea with a turtle who speaks Confucian philosophy. Back in the monastery, a bell tolls gently in the pre-dawn dark. The monk is already up, sweeping the courtyard in slow circles. You stretch. Somehow, that stiff wooden pillow did the trick. He smiles, says nothing, and hands you a bowl of warm rice porridge. The steam rises like morning prayers. You sit on a stone step and eat slowly, watching the day bloom from darkness. As you prepare to leave, you notice a wall covered in ancient calligraphy. It's a prayer for peace during sleep. Nothing fancy, just a wish for gentle dreams and easy waking. The last line catches your eye, even the immortals must rest. Now the world around you begins to fade. The incense thins, the monk bows, and the dream shifts one final time. You're floating now, no ship, no hammock, no monastery, just you, suspended in a space of soft grays and gentle hush. Your body is light, your breath steady, the stories of the night curling into the back of your mind like silk slipping off a spool. All the footsteps you followed, the sleepless alchemists, the whispering monks, the sailors cradled by stormy oceans, they begin to dissolve like fog at sunrise. Their voices become quieter, slower, fading into echoes. You remember odd fragments Mercury that glowed, a rat-filled bunk, a wooden pillow, a man who believed the sea spoke to him in dreams. But now those memories loosen, like buttons undone after a long day. You feel yourself sink just a little into whatever surface supports you. The fan hums, the air stills, even your thoughts begin to stretch and yawn. Let your limbs go slack. Let your mind drift from words into whispers, from whispers into warmth. There's nothing more to know tonight, no more stories to chase, no more timelines to unravel. You are here in this one still moment, wrapped in quiet, and somewhere deep within you, sleep is already blooming. Good night, traveler.